Hey book nerds, welcome to my channel. So I'm doing my August wrap up a little bit differently this month because I never got around to doing my August Snakes and Ladders video properly. But I did film the gameplay and I did select books for it. I thought I would do a Snakes and Ladders wrap up instead, so that way you don't get you get to watch the gameplay and what I imagine is the actual fun part for you, and you also get my opinions of the books at the same time. So that's what I'm going to do. If you don't know my Snakes and Ladders TBR, I play a game of Snakes and Ladders. It gives me prompts. I select books to read based off those prompts. I'll link the playlist down below with the September one and all the other ones, but yeah, so I'll do the August one as a wrap up, and yeah, I'll just go straight into the gameplay. These aren't all the books I read in August. I've not actually counted up how many books I read in August. This is just the Snakes and Ladders ones. And then I think I'm going to do a different wrap-up where I do my Galliathon wrap-up and the other kind of random books that I read in August. So this won't be my final August wrap-up, but I thought this was just a fun way of doing it since I have the footage. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Slide that up. We're on the challenge. And we have 400 plus pages. The first prompt I got was 400 plus page book, which is great. That's always a fantastic one for me to get. And I read for this prompt Midnight Sun by Stephan Meyer. So yeah, I was sort of a Twilight girl, not like full on Twilight girl, but I read the books. I enjoyed them the first time I read them. And I initially didn't have any interest in reading this, but my friend was desperate to read it, and I thought I'd get a copy and read it alongside her. She's a much slower reader than I am, and she didn't get a copy until her birthday. So I actually ended up kind of speed reading it. I say speed reading it. This thing's 800 pages. I didn't realise just how long it was when I agreed to read it. But yeah, and it is pretty much what I expected. I'm not going to give it a rating because it doesn't seem fair. I wasn't necessarily reading this because I thought it would be a genuinely good book. It does have some genuinely good moments in it, and it was just really surreal for me to be back in the Twilight universe with all these characters and all these things going on. I'll just mention a couple of things. So if you don't know, this is Twilight told from Edward's point of view, so it's literally the first book again. The first book I think is around 500 pages, this is around 800, so they've added 300 pages. They can tell you now they're not worth it. This book is really, really funny, not intentionally, but people far wittier than I have already mocked it in videos and Twitter, so if you're interested in that, I encourage you strongly to look that up. But it's really funny, particularly if you can remember Twilight, or if you can remember what Bella's mindset is like, because she's got such a low opinion of herself and she thinks that Edward basically thinks she's weird and a freak. And then in this book you just get him staring at her being what could possibly be going on in that beautiful mind? And when you read Twilight, you know that what's going on in her beautiful mind is her freaking the fuck out because she doesn't know how Edward feels towards her. Yeah, so that's one thing I wanted to bring up. The other thing I wanted to bring up is this book is such a downer because the original Twilight, I guess spoilers for Twilight, the original Twilight obviously ends with Bella in love with Edward. They go to the prom together, it's all nice from her perspective, it's really romantic. From his perspective, he's already decided to leave her, and that is the note that Midnight Sun ends on. And I understand, because you have to end on that note because that's what Edward is thinking in that moment, but it means that the book just kind of ends with Edward being yeah, I'm gonna leave her forever, and she's got no idea, and he knows how devastated she's gonna be, and that's just a really weird place to leave your book. I also find it incredibly funny that Edward literally hates everyone who's in love with Bella apart from Jacob, and with Jacob he's just yeah, he's a really cool guy. I just thought that was a nice touch. But yeah, I really enjoyed reading this book. If you want to read it, then go for it. It wasn't boring or anything. There's long chunks that nothing much happens, but I got through it, I enjoyed it, I'm glad I read it, and yeah, it was sure worth the time. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Narrowly dodging that ladder. We've got genre. We have top rated contemporary. Ding. And then we're going to go to top, and the top rated contemporary, Loveless, which I've already read. Shine, don't think that's out yet. Okay, so I've checked. The first one I actually have access to is Slay, because a couple of them were library books, and I don't want to go to the library at the moment, so Slay I own as an ebook, and that is the book I'm going to. So the next prompt was the top rated contemporary on my TBR. As you saw, the result was Slay by Brittney Morris, and I'm really sad I did not get to read this. I really wanted to prioritise it, particularly because representation, and that's really important. But I just didn't have time around the like several long books. You'll see when you see what else I read and like taking part in Galliathon and all that. But I still really want to read this before the end of the year. I think I might be able to fit it in around November. And like I said, it is the top rated contemporary, so I've heard great things and I'm sure it's a fantastic read. 5 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Green, which is a random. We have A to Z title. Our old favourite random letter generator. And the letter is P. So the next roll was A to Z title, and as you saw I generated P, which I'm really glad I did because it meant I got to pick Painkiller by N.J. Fountain. This is one of the thrillers that has been on my TBR for the longest time. I'm talking like a couple of years. These are like 4 years plus, I think. And it was on my list to read for this year and I got to it and I'm really happy. So this is a thriller about a woman with chronic pain, and basically at the start of the book she finds a suicide note written in her own handwriting, and she doesn't remember writing, basically saying that she was gonna kill herself, and she asks her husband about it and he's a bit weird about it. That's kind of all I want to say because that's all the blurb says. This book is told in dual perspective for the most of it, but well, it's told in dual perspective with most of it being focused on her point of view. Her name is Monica, I believe the character is called, and I just want to say, like, she was such a great character, like, genuinely. I don't know what it was because, and I don't want to be stereotypical, but this book is written by a man, and normally, like, especially in thrillers, men can't really write women this convincingly, but I really liked her. She was the main reason I loved this book. She was just, it's hard to explain, but she was just like a really great character, and it was really enjoyable being inside her head, even though obviously she's dealing with the chronic pain and there's quite a lot of, I will say there's heavy stuff in this, but it wasn't necessarily dealt with in a heavy way. It was dealt with in a quite light-hearted way. But yeah, so that was a massive plus because she was a fantastic character. I really enjoyed this. This is like around, I think, 400 pages, which is normally longer than I like my thrillers. But it wasn't really trying to do the whole thriller suspense thing, at least not in the same way that a typical psychological thriller will, for example. So I think that didn't necessarily, that's normally the issue I have with long thrillers, and because it wasn't trying to keep the tension up, there wasn't that issue. Having said that, this book does get a little bit ridiculous in parts. It gets very over the top. I was along for the ride, so I didn't really mind too much, but yeah, it's not, it was good. I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars, I believe, and I've been told the representation for chronic pain is really good. Obviously I can't speak for it, but I think that from what I've studied about chronic pain, it seemed pretty good. There's kind of some aspects that made me go a bit, but I think that's mostly because it's tied into the over-the-topness. I can't really say anything more, but I think if you like the sound of this thriller and you kind of want something a bit different, something that's going to stand out, I definitely recommend this. I was really surprised by it in a good way. 3. 1, 2, 3. Another challenge. And we have Author I Hate. So So the next prompt was author I hate, and I want to stress this now. I've basically run out of authors I hate that are on my TBR, because I've started being a lot better at removing books by authors I don't think I like. So this is, like, hate is a strong word. This is an author whose work previously did not gel with me. And I picked The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. So this was an ARC I was very kindly sent. This is a horror book, and basically when I previously read, it was The Last Final Girl or something, I think is the book that I read previously by this author, or I tried to read, I didn't actually complete it. And my issue with that book is that it was told in a very strange style for me, and I could not, it just didn't gel with me. I couldn't really parse what was actually happening, and that made me give up on it very quickly. And I was slightly worried that this was going to be the same, but thankfully it was not. So this is about a group of, I'm going to use the word Indians because that is the word used in the book, chosen by the author. I would normally say Native American, but I'm just going to roll with the Indian term. I do not mean it in an offensive way. I'm just purely using it because it's in the title and it is the term used within the book itself. But yeah, so it's about 4 Indians who go to hunt an elk one day on the reserve, and they hunt kind of in an area they're not really meant to hunt, and they end up killing this specific elk, and this kind of unfolds a whole bunch of events. It's very hard for me to explain because it kind of goes into magical realism territory, but essentially there is something, or the characters believe there is something that starts coming after them, and it starts focus on one character and then shifts focus to the other characters. So that's like the basic premise of this book. I've got a proper blog review for it, so I'll link that down below for a more coherent description. But the main thing I really, really liked about this book is it gripped me and terrified me and surprised me in a way that a horror book really hasn't for a while. It was so fantastic to just have this moment. I was completely absorbed by the book. I don't want to say what happens exactly, but I was so invested and I was so pleasantly surprised and horrified by something that happens. Like, it caught me completely off guard, and that was amazing. The reason this book is, I gave this book 4 stars, not 5, because it still has the same issues that I had with the Last Final Girl, whereby parts of the book I couldn't really tell what was going on, and it's not in a way that I enjoy. It wasn't like in a it was kind of in a magical realism way, but it was also in a kind of like, I physically couldn't tell who was in a scene or what was going on in a scene. And I think that's just something that it's like to do with the style of the author, and that's something that doesn't gel with me. The other thing was that I was sadly most invested in the initial, like, I guess, third or quarter of the book, however you want to phrase it. That was by far the best part for me. And I feel that after that, it didn't go completely downhill. There were still parts where I was super invested, but that to me was the best part. So I feel like it peaked very early on, and I kind of wish that story was the story that we got for the whole book, because when it swapped plots, I was less invested. And again, that's just a personal taste thing. But yeah, this book is definitely worth checking out. There's a whole bunch of trigger warnings, so if you need trigger warnings, let me know and I'll try and give them to you. There's also some attached to my blog, but the main one that I have been asked about on Twitter, so I'll mention it now, is animal cruelty. There is not really human-based animal cruelty, but several dogs do die in the course of this book, and their deaths are somewhat graphically described, so if that's kind of thing that you're bothered about, I wouldn't read this. And obviously there is a whole hunting aspect with the elk that is could also border along that bit. But yeah, I definitely recommend checking it out. I really, really enjoyed this book, and I'm glad I gave this author another try. Another 3. 1, 2, 3. Genre again. We have book in a series. So now we get on to a book in a series, and we get on to something that's actually quite difficult for me to talk about. So the book I selected for this is Kill River 3 by Cameron Roubique, and I'm going to talk honestly about this book. I'm not doing this in a vengeful way or a hateful way, but I want to be honest because this is my channel, this is my review, and I've also talked up these books a fair bit in the past, and I am withdrawing all my support for them, so I want to kind of talk about that as well without the drama of making a whole new video. But essentially I read this book, and if you don't know, the Kill River books are a set of slashers set in the 80s based around water parks, and there's a serial killer in a water park, very basic theme. I really enjoyed the first two. The characters skew very young, and that is relevant because this book starts with what I would call a mild to moderately graphic sex scene involving the 14-year-old protagonist. The person she's having sex with is either 16 or 17, it's a little unclear based on the timeline, but regardless, the person she's having sex with is not 14, and it's described in a way that made me very uncomfortable, given that this is a grown man writing this book. Her age is brought up in the sex scene, midway through, which was really weird, and it does cut away as the actual deed is done, but everything before is kind of described. So anyway, that's not the point of this. The point is that I commented on Twitter because I was pretty disgusted by this, to be honest with you. This is an author I admired, and I really liked the work, and I felt like this was a really weird decision because this book could have easily had a time skip and nothing would have changed. The sex scene's not plot relevant, by the way. It's not relevant in any way. It's just a scene that happens that could have been cut. So I made a comment on Twitter, and then I thought that was it. I found out a few days later that the author had screenshotted my tweet and posted an apology, not tagged me in it, but posted an apology with my tweet with all my information on it. And his apology consisted of, I am sorry that people are offended. That was not my intention, which is a whole other thing, but yeah. And then, so I found this out because someone who saw that post decided to contact me and basically call me all sorts of things, call me a Karen, call me ridiculous for even being offended by the idea of a 14-year-old having sex in a book written by an adult man. And then I went to this author's page and I found there was a load of people like that who had commented deciding this was the hill they were going to die on, and that I was clearly not a real horror fan. Clearly I'd never seen a slasher movie in my life, and clearly I just wanted to ruin the fun for everyone. So it was really unpleasant because it caught me completely off guard. Like I said, I hadn't been tagged in it. I'd given no opportunity to defend myself. I commented on it, and the author deleted the post. Did not contact me in any way, did not apologise for doing that, just deleted everything and then said he didn't want to talk about it anymore. Not to me, to someone else who asked him what was going on. And then the person who I'd been in contact with kept on talking to me and being really pretty awful, so I just blocked him, and I blocked a bunch of people who commented on that post because I was worried that more people would come for me, essentially. So that's what happened. Just to make it super clear, in case anyone has found this video and is watching it, the reason I object is because that it's a 14-year-old character where the age is brought up in the sex scene. The sex scene is not plot relevant, it doesn't deal with the age being underage, and it feels very gratuitous and slightly graphic in a way that made me uncomfortable because I knew it was being written by an adult man. And then, to counter the common arguments, no one in a slasher film is actually 14 being filmed having a sex scene, because that is illegal and no one would want to watch it, I hope, because if you said, here's my movie, here's a 14-year-old having sex, you'd go, what is wrong with you? Yes, 14-year-olds in real life have sex, they have agency, They are not being written by adult men, and I'm not commenting on real people's lives. I am commenting on the use of fictional characters in a gratuitous way. And yes, I have seen slasher films. In fact, I would also just like to add that the character that the author has said is based on was played by a 19-year-old in the film. So, like, that's not what a 14-year-old looks like, and you should know this. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking about this now, because, yeah, it's stressful. But, yeah, just to make it abundantly clear, I do no longer recommend the Killer River books or anything by this author. I've left up my positive reviews because I don't want to provoke the words of the books that I enjoyed at the time, but I have added a little caveat that says that I don't support them anymore. So, yeah, that was that book. That sure was fun. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Back to the start. Goals. Arc. On a much happier note, the next prompt was Arc, and I picked 8 Detectives by Alex Pavesi. This came out in August. I believe it was around either the 3rd or the 8th of August this came out. And this is a wonderful book. It is a 5-star book. Yeah, I just flat out gave it 5 stars, that's how good it is. And it's kind of like a murder mystery thriller type thing. It's essentially a love letter to classic murder mysteries, by which I mostly mean Agatha Christie, but a lot of classics, but those are the ones that I identify with and love. And the premise of this book is that there is a old crime author who basically wrote a academic essay detailing the mathematics of crime fiction. And then alongside this essay, he published the mathematical formula, like stories illustrating the mathematical formula. This was about, I think, 30 years ago in text, and now it's 30 years later, and this female editor has decided she wants to republish the collection again because she thinks it'll do way better. It didn't really sell very well, and now she thinks there's like a huge interest and they'll be able to get it like the market it deserves. So she goes to stay with the crime writer and read through his stories and edit them to eventually publish them into a new collection. And as she starts reading the stories and as she starts editing them, she starts realising there's some weird stuff going on. And that's kind of like the premise of the blurb. The way the book is structured is you get one of the short stories and then you get a chapter of the author and the editor kind of discussing it, and it goes to that plot, and then you get another one of the short stories, and it's formatted like that. This book was such a joy to read. I genuinely loved it so much. I stayed up till about 4 a.m. finishing it because I was so invested. It is creepy. It is fantastically written. It surprised me multiple times, which is always fantastic in a thriller. And like I said, the short stories are just odes to like detective fiction. There's literally one that is a sort of parody / retelling of And Then There Went On, which is my favourite Agatha Christie book. But it's acknowledged within text in a way that's actually, like, it's not ripping it off. It's the author in text is like, yeah, I literally just basically did this, but in a different way because I wanted to. And I just loved it. You can tell that it was written by someone who really cares about murder mysteries, and as someone else who also really cares about murder mysteries, I just really appreciated that attention to detail. And it was just a really good book. Even if you don't know anything about murder mysteries, I think you get a lot out of this, so long as you enjoy reading that kind of fiction, because the short stories are a huge part of it, then like you'll get a lot out of this book. But like I said, it did generally scare me. There's some trigger warnings. It's pretty graphic in terms of gore in certain parts. Some of the stories get a bit kind of more violent-y, like horror stories, I guess. But apart from that, I can't think of anything major. But again, check my blog post because I will have tagged it with all the trigger warnings. But yeah, I'm literally obsessed with this book. I need everyone to read it and like love it because I was so happy that I read this book, and I genuinely want it to do really well because it's one of the best books that I've read this year. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 genre again. We have female friendship. And the final prompt was a trope one, and it was female friendships. So if you don't know, this is like one of my favourite tropes whereby there's like a dark female friendship. It happens in like thrillers and horrors and that kind of thing. I picked a horror to fulfill this, and it is The Dead Girls Club by Damien and Angelica Walters. So this is a horror book. I kind of almost see it more as a thriller, but it has got strong horror elements, so I can see where people are coming from. This is about a woman who, when she was a teenager, I think around 12, 13-ish, she had a group of friends, and she had a particular best friend, and her best friend starts kind of bringing up this urban legend of, I think it's like the Red Woman or something like that. And she starts bringing up this urban legend and gets this whole group obsessed with this urban legend and convinced it's real. And then I'm gonna say more because that's what the blurb says, but I'm uncomfortable giving away this much of the book because that's one of the issues that I had with it. But essentially, in the modern day, you learn that this woman killed her best friend because of the Red Woman, and it's kind of told present day, where someone is now messing with our main character, and the past where they're kids and stuff's going on with the urban legend and all that kind of thing. So I already said this blurb tells you everything that I've just told you, and that doesn't actually happen till quite late in the book, so that was a bit disappointing for me. I kind of hoped that would be earlier on and there'd be more story after that, but there isn't really much after that, and like it works really well in terms of the past story, but in the present there's not a whole lot going on. I really liked the main character. The main character was really good. I thought she was interesting, she was complex, she was sympathetic. This really does have more of a thriller tone in terms of the modern day, and the past segments reminded me very much of My Best Friend's Exorcism in a good way, by Grady Hendrix, so that was nice. I think I ended up giving this like 3.5 stars or 4 stars. I really liked a lot of aspects of it, but it did fall a bit flat, and a large part of that, like I said, is already that so much of the plot was given away. But I do think this deals with a lot of really interesting concepts, and I think it actually does what it's trying to do better than My Best Friend's Exorcism did, in some ways, because it doesn't have a lot of the problems that I had with My Best Friend's Exorcism, where it's not like a lot of gross out stuff and that kind of thing. So yeah, this is a really interesting book for me. I really definitely recommend it, and I think it does deserve a lot of the praise that I've heard it given. But I would just be aware that it's not necessarily a super strong horror in terms of the elements, and it's kind of got the more cerebral thriller thing going on. I think maybe if I'd known that going in, I would have a slightly different opinion of it, but I did really enjoy it. I did think it was really good, so it's definitely worth checking out, and I'm glad that it was a good horror book. It was one of the ones I really wanted to read this year, so I'm glad I got around to it. But yeah, so that was part of my August wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed this. All the other Snakes and Ladders should be on time. Like I said, the September one's already up if you want to go watch that. Halloween one will be coming soon. I'm super excited to film that. I've got big plans for that one. But yeah, let me know if you read any of these books, what you thought. Let me know if you have any, I don't know, comments about the things I talked about, or, you know, if some support would be lovely, but I don't want to like ask for support because that feels weird, but you know, that kind of thing, you know what I'm saying. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, it helps me out massively, and I hope to see you next time.